When it comes to your literature exam, there are 3 key pieces of knowledge that you need no matter what the text is that you're answering on. This video is going to show you examples of all 3. Number 1, you need to know what the writer's point of view and purpose is. All the exam boards have that in their top criteria. What is the author trying to change in the mind of the reader or the audience? That is the writer's purpose. You get loads of marks right at the top, grade 8 and 9, for understanding those. Number 2, in order to write about the writer's purpose, well, obviously you have to go back to the time the writer was writing in. And that is where context becomes so important. The examiners don't want you just to know some context and just bam, dump it in the middle of your essay. That counts for 0. However, when you're writing about the author's point of view, you take a little bit of historical context and say, look, this context helps me prove why the writer had that point of view. This is what society was like at the time, and this is how my writer wanted to change that society. And number 3, you need to have a profound knowledge of the ending of the text, because when the writer, every writer, gets to the end of the text, they wrap up their ideas to give you a new perspective of looking at their world that they've created and their society that their text is obviously responding to. So when you understand the ending really well, you can write brilliantly about the author's purpose and the context of the time to back up that purpose. Your conclusion isn't just restating what you have shown in the essay, it's giving a new idea about what that writer's purpose might be. 3 key bits of knowledge, which I'm going to show you on the screen now. Let's jump in with A Christmas Carol. So here is my thesis statement, which will fit any essay on A Christmas Carol. Although Dickens writes the novel as an entertainment, he wants the story of Scrooge's moral awakening to haunt the reader and so lead to change in how his readers think about the poor. So that's a basic 3-part thesis statement, but it gives you 3 ideas, 3 points of view that Dickens had. Having 3 parts means that as I go through the essay, I'm going to prove each of those 3 parts, and then I'm going to get a high mark. It's as simple as that. Here is an example of context, which isn't just dumped into the essay, it's there to answer the question. Dickens shows his opposition to the poor laws which created workhouses by making Scrooge support them. Are they still in operation? Scrooge also supports the criminalisation of the poor. Are there no prisons? And believes these are necessary to decrease the surplus population. Then Dickens creates Tiny Tim to show us what the surplus population looks like, and he uses Tiny Tim's impending death to transform Scrooge's view. So you can see how I've used a bit of the context to then say how this shows Dickens' ideas, his opposition to the poor laws and his opposition to this whole idea that society had that the surplus population was too great and therefore they were quite happy for many of the poor to die out. Now the next paragraph gives us some more about that context linked to Dickens' point of view, but remember I said you want to link it to society, and so I do that at the end down here. Dickens invites these readers who would employ domestic servants into the warmth of the Cratchits' family Christmas so that they too can understand the social effects of low wages. In other words, Dickens wants to change society by getting all his readers, who are employers of domestic servants, to pay higher wages so that their employees can lead better lives and not live a life of impoverishment like the Cratchits. So the parts of the essay that I've shown you at the minute are actually free on my newsletter, which you can find on Substack, and the link's in the description below. The next thing to see is that your conclusion needs to deal with the end of the text. So here we have, therefore Dickens ends with Scrooge raising Bob's salary. Bob's salary was only the going rate in 1843, not a product of Scrooge's miserliness. So this action becomes a clear signal to the reader to increase what they pay their employees and domestic staff. The final line, ending with God bless us, is partly ironic. God isn't going to help the poor, so we, like Scrooge, have to. And that also illustrates how I suggest that your conclusion needs to introduce a new idea and also, if possible, link with a quote. Dealing with the ending like this, as you can see, deals explicitly with the author's ideas, and that means the examiner has to give you top marks. Let's see those three things with an essay from an Inspector Calls. Here is the thesis statement. Sheila Burling's character undergoes the greatest transformation in the play. Priestley uses her to present his hope for the future. That's idea number one. She represents the younger generation and Priestley's social beliefs. Priestley highlights this when the inspector tells her the young are more impressionable. Idea number three. We've clearly told the examiner why Priestley has put Sheila in the play, what her role is, and how that's going to link to his socialist beliefs. Those are the things that we're going to prove, and also that the young generation are more likely to take up those socialist beliefs. Now, here is an example of how you can introduce your context without just plonking it into your essay, but using it more like an embedded quote. So, her here refers to Sheila, and this refers to how she's been interrogated by the inspector. Her interrogation follows Burling's. She sympathises with Eva when she hears her father had sacked her, declaring it's a rotten shame. She also defends the workers, exclaiming they're not cheap labour, they're people. This scene marks the beginning of her transformation from entitled, wealthy capitalist, there's your context, to supporter of social equality and socialism. There's some more of your context, and social equality is what this student is using to represent society. So it's very easy to do once you get into that habit, and as you can see, it's impossible then to write about the context without writing about the writer's ideas. And obviously, the writer's ideas here are to promote socialism. Now, if we jump to the end of the essay, the conclusion is very short. In conclusion, Priestley uses this to represent the clash between capitalist and socialist perspectives. So we have the context, we have Priestley's point of view, but the part that's being written about here is not the ending at all. However, the student has still scored a grade 9 in this essay because they dealt so successfully with the author's ideas. They could have scored 100% had they written about the ending. Here are the 9 things that make that essay brilliant. You can also find that in my Substack newsletter or in my guide, which isn't published yet, or it's going to be good, because it has an incredible 31 example essays in it. But why wait for that? If you'd like to see a video on a grade 9 essay to an Inspector Calls, you're in the right place. It's coming up now.